Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development. This meeting is taking place in a hybrid format and is public. For those in person, please follow the health and safety guidelines as per the cards on the table to prevent audio or feedback incidents. In particular, please keep earpieces away from microphones to reduce the risk of injury from feedback incidents. Aujourd'hui, le comité examine le budget.
Today, the committee is studying the Supplementary Estimate C 2025-2026.
The meeting a few minutes before the scheduled hour of adjournment so that the committee may vote on these supplementary estimates. The committee is meeting with the Honorable Julie Dabroussen, Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Nature, who is accompanied by the following witnesses. From the Department of Environment, Alison McDermott, Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy and International Affairs Branch. From Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, Terence Hubbard, President. From Parks Canada Agency, Andrew Campbell, Acting President and Chief Executive Officer and Senior Vice President of Transformation. Opening remarks and questioning witnesses. Mr. Dabroussen, you know the drill, famous cards. The floor is yours, and welcome for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, and I'm happy to meet with members of the committee to discuss the 2025-2026 Supplementary Estimate C for Environment and Climate Change Canada, the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, and the Parks Canada Agency. The spending adjustments we are discussing today are part of the government's broader effort to ensure that public resources are concentrated where they will have the greatest impact, strengthening Canada's economy, protecting nature, and advancing our climate goals. As Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Nature, I'm focused on protecting the environment, delivering ambitious climate action while growing a strong, sustainable economy, and building a healthier and more resilient Canada for all Canadians. Environmental and economic policy are not mutually exclusive. They're part of the same conversation. Mr. Chair, well-designed environmental policy encourages cleaner technology, more efficient ways of producing goods. It paves the way to creating new jobs and industries while reducing pollution and long-term environmental damage. Nowhere is that clearer than the global energy transformation currently underway. It is one of the most significant economic shifts of our time. Around the world, it's reshaping how capital flows, where industries invest, and how countries build their competitive advantage. The countries that succeed in this new landscape will be those that combine economic strength with environmental ambition. These are the countries that will gain jobs, wealth, and security for decades. Canada is well positioned to lead that transition. We have the critical minerals needed to power the technologies of the future, world-class scientific capacity, plus abundant clean electricity. We have leading researchers, innovative companies, and workers with the skills to build the next generation of energy infrastructure. But leadership in the global energy transition requires deliberate policy, strategic investment, and the institutions that can deliver results for Canadians. In the months ahead, our government will continue advancing policies to support clean growth, strengthen climate resilience, and protect the natural systems that Canadians value so deeply. These efforts will position Canada to meet the environmental challenges of our time and seize the economic opportunities that come with them. Let's turn to the 2025-2026 Supplementary Estimate C before us. These are the last updates to the estimates for the fiscal year. Starting with Environment and Climate Change Canada, its 2025-2026 Supplementary Estimate C would increase the department's reference levels by a net amount of $4.8 million. This includes increases such as $2.5 million for high-performance computing operations and $1 million to raise awareness and inform Canadians about climate initiatives. There are multiple transfers from other departments that total a net increase of $1.3 million. This includes $1 million from Natural Resources Canada to support the federal Contaminated Sites Action Plan. Plus, there's a $7.2 million reallocation from operating resources to capital expenditures. Pour l'Agence Parcs Canada, le budget supplémentaire.
For Parks Canada, its 2025-26 Supplementary Estimate C provide an increase in reference levels by a net amount of $10.9 million. This amount is compensated compensation for the lost revenue component of the renewal of the Canada Strong Pass for the 2025-26 winter holiday season, plus there is $22 million in internal reallocation from capital to operating expenditures to prioritize urgent, non-discretionary operating activities needed for the recovery and rebuilding of Jasper National Park. This results in overall increases of $32.9 million in operating expenditures, grants, and contributions, and a decrease of $22 million in capital expenditures. Finally, the Impact Assessment Agency is internally reallocating $6 million to grants and contributions from operating expenditures. This transfer supports Indigenous organizations in strengthening their capacity for early engagement in major projects in alignment with the new accelerated project timelines. Mr. Chair, I'm going to stop here. I hope this summary provides members with an overview of the 2025-26 supplementary estimates. And I'm happy to take questions now from members of this committee. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Minister, for your comments. And we will begin with the Conservative Party. You have 6 minutes. Mr. Leslie, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Minister, hunters, anglers, and outfitters are deeply concerned that they will lose their rights and, in some cases, their livelihoods if the proposed Seal River National Park Reserve in Manitoba moves ahead. Will you guarantee that no Canadian would be banned from continuing to hunt or fish if this proposed national park moves ahead?
Look, the proposed national park that we're doing with Seal River is in conjunction with Manitoba. We have a very strong relationship with the province of Manitoba, making sure that people and stakeholders, that includes the hunters in the area, are all being consulted and included in these conversations. I have had very good conversations with the Minister of Environment for Manitoba. I know that he takes this issue very seriously.
Minister, I asked if you could guarantee that nobody will be banned from hunting or angling in that area, and if you could also confirm and guarantee that no lodges or outfitters operating there now will have to cease if it moves ahead.
So my understanding, and this is going to, the project is not complete, but I believe that access is not a problem and that is going to be access, as I've been talking with the Minister of Environment for Manitoba on these issues. And I'm happy to provide you with greater detail as we move forward. The project is obviously not complete, so I need to be able to get you better information as we move to completion.
I would appreciate that.
But I don't believe that access is going to be a problem.
Well, not believing and saying confidently, as the Minister in charge of Parks Canada, that it will not be a problem are two different things. So I'd like you to do the latter.
I think what I can say is that there's a draft consultation coming out, and that we are aware of the issues and that that's something that's going to be out for conversation. But I know that we are all very aware of the concerns and the issues. And so I'm just letting you know and happy to follow up with you again on that.
Thank you, Minister. Has Parks Canada identified how many acres of forest require prescribed burning to reduce wildfire risk in national parks across Canada?
I have not made that assessment, but I do have the Andrew Campbell from Parks Canada who can provide perhaps more detail on that.
Yeah, and certainly in each of the national parks across Canada, there is a fire management plan for each and every national park. And in those fire management plans, actually, we've been updating on a large number of those fire management plans to respond to the report that we received from NRCan after the Jasper fire. So, yes, we have done not just prescribed burn. Prescribed burn is one tool. Obviously, there's also forest thinning, and there's also removal of forest in areas close in and around town sites. And so between all of those, we have done the work on what needs to be done around towns in national parks.
So given the aftermath, the devastation of Jasper, Canadians want to know one thing, and it is just that, whether it be prescribed burns or other management tools, is that going to be increased in parks across Canada?
One thing before we go there, what happened in Jasper is devastating, and so I definitely want to speak about the people who were impacted by that fire. But there was also a lot of the work that was done by Parks Canada that managed to save a lot of important infrastructure.
We're going to
there as well.
disagree on that one, Minister. We had a very lengthy study on that in the last Parliament. But let me move on because it doesn't sound like we're going to get any firm commitments there. Minister, since you were made Minister of Environment, how many times have you directly met with the Net Zero Advisory Body to discuss its recommendations?
In fact, if I can just let you know, I'll be meeting with them again on Friday, and I do meet with them and talk with them, and I think that we have good conversations moving forward.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because several members have resigned saying that their advice was being ignored. So my question is, if you just ignore the advice of this body, why does it even exist?
So I would say very much that I do not ignore their advice. I think that they come with very important experience and very important recommendations, and that, as I mentioned, I'll be meeting with them on Friday. We're working on how we can make it the most effective and possible.
Thank you, Minister. Now, the government's own consultation report, what we heard on the fertilizer emissions reduction target, found that many farmers warned that the target could eventually lead to mandatory limits on fertilizer use. So I'm hoping you will clearly state today that the government will never impose caps or reductions on fertilizer use for Canadian farmers.
So environmental policy that I have before me is not imposing caps. And what I would say is we recognize very much the importance of farming. In fact, what I will also say is I was recently at the University of Guelph, where I was able to meet with researchers who were talking about all of the important ways that they're supporting farming and agriculture in a time of climate change. And there's a lot of research that is being done specifically on how to support farmers in this moment.
I mean, your government is closing a series of research stations under AAFC, so I would disagree with that. But I will move on. Now, legislation has been tabled in Parliament to repeal the tanker ban off of Canada's west coast, Bill C-264. Do you plan to support that legislation as a government?
So when you say legislation, you're not referring to government legislation, so I want to be very clear about that from the first point. And I will say on
tabling legislation to allow our oil and gas to move off our west coast that it currently cannot due to the tanker ban? You don't plan on acting on that?
What I will say is that that is not government legislation that we put forward. And we have been very clear, and will continue to be clear, that anything, if we're talking about moving forward with any pipeline, will have to be with the agreement of the province of British Columbia and First Nations.
Debrusin, the floor is yours, Mr. Saint-Pierre, for 6 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister, for sharing your time with us again. You've been very generous with this committee. So recently, the Canadian Climate Institute, probably over the last week, issued an analysis that looked at the cost of industrial carbon pricing. And their analysis indicated that the cost of about a Timbit from Tim Hortons would be attributed to the oil and gas sector. I'm a big fan of my double-doubles from Tim Hortons, and it's very enticing that industrial carbon pricing will be quite inexpensive. So maybe a question to you, Minister, is can you comment on this recent analysis and why industrial carbon pricing puts minimal impact on Canada's competitiveness?
Thank you. And thank you for that question, and thank you for the shout-out for all of our Timbit eating ways, which are, important part of my everyday too. Look, industrial carbon pricing, the studies show, adds zero additional costs to the cost of food. And I keep repeating that because I think it's very important to be clear with Canadians about that. But the other part about why industrial carbon pricing is so important is because it creates the incentives for industry, and we hear it time and time again from industry. They need that certainty. And they do look at it as creating the incentives necessary for innovation. So we hear that from industries like the Cement Association has come out in favor. Frankly, at previous committee hearings, oil and gas industry came out in favor of industrial carbon pricing. It's something that works to create the certainty that industry needs, and it does it in a way that actually creates incentives for innovation. I will add one last piece to that, if I may, which is it's not just about the innovation here at home, it's also about access to markets around the world. And we're in a moment where we're looking for trade diversification. We know that we need to do that. And when we look at markets like the UK, like the European Union, they're looking at the carbon load of products coming in by putting in place carbon border adjustments. If we don't have an industrial carbon price, that puts us at a disadvantage at accessing those markets. And finally, it's not like out of our top 10 trading partners below after the United States, they are all putting in place measures regarding carbon and pricing carbon. So this is something about how do we position ourselves for the global economy and how do we create the innovation here at home. It's very much a central part of how we make Canada more competitive.
Merci. Je vais peut-être poser mes dernières questions en français, si vous me permettez.
Thank you, and I'll put my final question in French with your permission. You mentioned Canada's competitiveness, and recently we've seen announcements, media releases about the automobile strategy. Could you tell us a bit about that and how it will reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Thank you. I think it's so important to discuss the automobile strategy. It's such a good example of our industrial strategy that's also an environmental strategy, both together. It really shows how we can move both those aims forward together. And being from Ontario, I know how important it is in my province to have a strong manufacturing sector. Same in Quebec. There are many companies making the parts needed for vehicles out of Quebec. And if we have a strong manufacturing sector able to create the vehicles of the future, which are electric, then we are improving our competitiveness as an economy overall. We know that in Europe in December, for the very first time, the sale of electric vehicles was higher, really, in number than that of conventional vehicles. We know that around the world, one of every new 4 vehicles being sold are electric. So I prefer that we ensure those jobs go to Canadians. All this shows that our approach is supportive of strategies that keep good jobs here, create good jobs here, unionize jobs very often, but that it's also an environmental approach. And this is how we'll ensure that our economy remains competitive going into the future. My last question then. I'm in the riding of Honoré-Mercier to the east of Montreal, and public transportation is a big issue for us. We're just to the north of Laval, and then there's Terrebonne nearby. Everyone, of course, is now discussing the Foreseen Alto project. It takes an hour and a half to go from Honoré-Mercier to downtown Montreal at present. So we're hearing a lot of good things said about the Alto project. Could you give us a 30-second summary of the state of the Alto project for the citizens of Honoré-Mercier, of Quebec, and of Canada? I think that day in and day out, people think of how they could possibly move around more quickly and easily, and also with a less carbon load. So the high-speed rail, the Alto project, it's really a considerable project for all Quebecers, and for Ontario, the train will serve a corridor in which about 40% of Canadians live, providing them with an opportunity to move around quickly with a lower carbon load and likely more comfortably than the way they are traveling now, such as in a plane even. It gives people a different choice. That's the aim. And I think people like having a choice of how to go from one place to the other. It's really a wonderful opportunity, not only in what it will offer once it's finished, but also for the jobs that will be involved in building it. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm told that time is up. Anyway, it's really wonderful for jobs and also for what Canadians will be able to do once it's up and running. Thank you, Madam Minister. I was so pleased with your answer because he was mentioning Laval, you see, and that is my riding. So I knew our people were interested in your answer. Mr. Bonnet, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Minister, you presented an agreement with Alberta recently regarding environmental assessment. The costs of impact assessments. Are you ready to enter into a similar agreement with Quebec to ensure that Quebec carry out its own impact assessments on its own territory? I would be very happy to discuss this with the province of Quebec. We are always ready to work with all and any province on agreements and projects. So what are we doing with these agreements? It's quite clear on the federal side, what's federal is covered by the federal, and what's a provincial jurisdiction will be covered by the province. We're simplifying the life of people putting forward projects. I always use the example of being a mother of a child who was in the public school system, and they had a lot of forms. You know, I had to fill out for them, and we're just making it simple, one form. So you're ready to work with Quebec? Yes, absolutely. Right now, the Impact Assessment Agency is examining a project. In fact, they're meeting with Marinvest proponents, a natural liquefied glass project, and we're told that the agency is supplying advice, support, contact with Indigenous communities to simplify and support the investment. Is this a common practice for the agency to help oil and gas project proponents before the project is even up and running, or people are aware of it before it has gone public? Well, what we're doing is answer questions so that people have correct information as they go about deciding whether or not to carry out a project. Right now, that project is hypothetical. The project has not been given the green light, but has your cabinet met the proponents? Well, what I've said is that I have not met them. It's not a finalized project. It's merely hypothetical at this point. But has your cabinet, people around you, people in the cabinet, have they met the proponents? I don't think so. You're sure they haven't, or it's no? Well, my answer is that I think no, but we do meet a number of people, though, who have ideas about what they would like to do, what they have in mind. That is not a statement about a project going forward, though, if there isn't a final project that's been put forward. All right, so I'm told that there's a 20-page document available at the agency, but it's not public yet. Could you provide it to the committee? This was presented to the agency. Well, what really counts when it comes to people who have ideas about projects is ensuring that they have the right information, correct information about what's on the federal side, what's under federal jurisdiction, and so on. Yes, but we have this 20-page document. I'd like it. I'm trying to find the right wording in French, but early engagement is good.
Projet aller à l'avant ou non. Alors maintenant, on n'a pas de décision.
D'accord. Mais est-ce que ce document-là...
If it's a good project, it will be accepted. It will go ahead. All right. But there are these 20 pages that have gone to the agency. Are you ready to provide us with that document? Make it available to us. If someone provides information to the agency or asks questions of the agency, I don't think it's up to us to provide all that to the public. It's business information. Baie du Nord, the approval of a project there. The government has accepted to cover the costs of exploration for petrol in the sea, about $1 million potentially, that the federal government would cover rather than it being a company covering it. Do you agree to having the federal government pay about $100 million in costs for prospecting on the sea-based? Well, the Baie du Nord project, I'm talking about the costs here, if they've been approved. The project as a whole has been approved by the prior government. But it's your government who has said that they will cover the costs. And do you agree to that, having the government paying the cost up to $1 million when it should be the company paying it? Well, what I am saying is that the project was approved with all the terms and conditions by the prior government. What we're working on is agreements with the governments of Newfoundland and Labrador. Yes, but your government said that that cost would be covered by the government. It's not the prior government. So I can confirm that that's the case. Negotiation is underway with the province on the terms and conditions. We're working with the government of Newfoundland and Labrador. You're not confirming the $1 million? No, I'm not. I'm saying that, but your colleague of Fisheries and Oceans, I don't think she gave that figure. So how much does it cost then, or will it cost, or will you cover? I'm saying that we are negotiating the terms and conditions at present, so this is nothing we can state at present. So we have no figures because, you know, journalists have mentioned $1 million. Or, well, you know, journalists can say what they wish, but I'm telling you that we are negotiating, and this is not public knowledge. We're working on this. All right, 2026, 2027, $1.2 billion less will be spent by by your department. Why? We are no longer drawing on the consumer carbon price, so there were amounts entering our coffers from that, and that we spent, of course. And there's also the Northwest Territories, Our Land for the Future project. That was a one-time expense, a considerable one. And so this explains the lower budgeting amount this year. Thank you, Madam Minister.
For 5 minutes.
Minister, thank you for appearing. Minister, Canadians have watched your department reverse course or walk back decisions made by earlier Liberal environment ministers. So is fixing those mistakes now a regular part of your job?
I actually take issue with just the framing of that question. I don't think that there were mistakes, and I think that I am...
It's for context, though. We invited you here a while back to talk about your mandate specifically, and you didn't appear on those premises. So Canadians are just curious, and we're curious if your mandate is actually reversing those policies that previous ministers put in place.
Okay. I have been here several times. That's a matter of record. So just to be clear, I don't know how many times I've been here, but that's a point I've lost count. But on the next piece, my job is to make sure that we build the strongest economy for our country, and we do that while protecting the environment. That means fighting climate change. I'm hoping that the Conservatives are going to help us on that fight, because every day I fight to even keep an industrial carbon price, which is actually what industry is asking for us.
Minister, Canadians keep hearing about billions, in fact, $2.1 billion in climate spending, but emissions are not falling at the pace that you've promised. So just a simple question, at what point does your department start measuring success by actual reductions rather than the amount of money that the government is spending?
I measure success by looking at how we are changing the way that we heat and cool our homes, the way we get around. We were just talking about high-speed rail. That is actually an opportunity to get people to travel in a way that reduces emissions. We're talking about
numbers
building.
Not a part of the success, though?
This is about reducing emissions. It's about changing domestically how we like heat and cool our homes, how we get around, how we're reducing emissions. And we have so many success stories to tell. Methane
but you're still not
alone.
reaching the targets, though, that your own government promised. So it's just a simple question. At what point does the conversation start to change to success actually being at the targets that you've promised? It's just a very simple question.
The success is in reducing emissions, which we are doing. And by the way, the previous Conservative government left us with emissions tracking upwards and no path to bring them down. Emissions are going down. We are actually taking action. And what we're doing is we're making sure that we're embedding it in our industrial policies and that we're building the infrastructure to support the regulations to make it last. That is what's happening in our country. And Canadians want us to build our country. They want to see us build it strong. They want to see us build it well. And so, again, I'm going to put it to Conservatives. Why can't they join it? It's always negative from your side. Why don't you just be part of the positive building forward of our country?
Thank you, Minister. The Net Zero Accelerator and the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program together receive more than $500 million in those estimates. Now, the Auditor General has already warned about the overlap between federal climate programs. So before you spend another $500 million of taxpayer dollars, can you guarantee Canadians that none of the funding duplicates programs that already exist?
The funding that we put in place helps to support businesses and Canadians to reduce emissions, to save on their energy bills. Look, I'll give you an example. Down at the Red Path Sugar Factory, in my home city, we actually, with the Government of Ontario, went and we helped to support them changing the way that they light their buildings and it made it safer for workers, which is important, and at the same time it reduced their energy bills and it reduced their emissions. These are the kinds of things that we do, and I don't know why you would be talking down us making those kind of investments.
Well, Minister, we're in a cost of living crisis. Inflation is rising. People are concerned about the amount of money that the government spends. I don't think it's an unreasonable question to ask if there's duplication in funding pots. This is an important question. So that's the question that I put to you. Is there a duplication among these programs? Or is there a risk of that to Canadians?
There is no risk to the Canadians. But you know what? I'm really happy that you raised the part about bills and the like, because I would like to be able to remind people, I know that you've raised the cost of heating and cooling in your community, and there's an oil-to-heat pump program that's available to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians right now, where the federal government and the province of Newfoundland and Labrador have joined together. They can look it up. I'm happy to provide that information. That will help them to actually reduce their heat bills right now.
I just have one. I'm running out of time, so I just wanted to, you diverted to Newfoundland and Labrador, and I just wanted to ask something specific to my riding. Grossmore National Park, as you know, is in my riding. I have had a lot of people within the park reach out to me with respect to fire risk. We actually submitted an order paper question, and the information that came back is that Grossmore National Park allocates $5,000 annually for wildfire prevention. So just given the risks, and of course, Newfoundland and Labrador is highly sensitive to this. Yeah, sure. How can $5,000 a year sufficiently meaningfully reduce wildfire risk in this massive national park?
Short answer, Minister, please.
To give it to Andrew Campbell to be able to answer specifically how that's used.
Yeah, so again, as with every park, there is a park fire management plan that is done for Grossmore National Park. For those that aren't aware, I know, Mr. Chair, that the member is aware. It's a wet coastal balsam fir forest in the area. Since 1973, and before 1973, there has not been a fire in the park. We do work with the province, and there is an MOU between ourselves and the province in fire reduction, and we were happy to be able to share the plan with the member from Grossmore.
Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Mrs. Miedema, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Minister. Thank you for being here. Just a reminder to colleagues that if we don't spend money to invest in climate action, we're going to be in a more expensive and worse situation with more and more wildfires going forward. So I think it's really important that we remember that, and that we invest now to save later. I'm really interested in this replacement of the high-performance computing solution for the Meteorological Service of Canada. The supplementary estimates for Budget 2025 pledge to actually provide funding for the replacement of this solution. Can you, Minister, please talk a little bit about what this is going to do to ensure Canada's weather forecasting capabilities remain up to date, and how it will support long-term projections on climate change for Canada?
Thank you. Yeah, the high performance computer is actually an exciting opportunity for us, because it does actually go to how we have the most advanced computing to be able to provide that meteorological information. I'll also point out it's dual use. It can work to support defense as well. It's important for Canadian Armed Forces to also have the most up-to-date information. So it's something that, we can talk about. People, when they think of meteorology, they might think about how do we get our weather day to day, but there are actually other implications for aviation and transportation and for our armed forces. So this is going to make sure that we can better protect in all of those ways. I was recently in Dorval, Quebec, where they actually have meteorological, I'm having a hard time saying that, meteorological services based. And they were able to actually run through with me how they use this information. When we're talking about things like predicting areas, we were talking about wildfires, being able to predict, what weather will be, whether there's going to be like droughts, floods, these kinds of things. Like they can give predictions that can help us on emergency management. Like I said, when it comes to aviation, that they can actually predict and provide. They are responsible for providing information to pilots as they get into our airspace about what they can expect and how to make sure that they keep passengers safe. So having this high-performance computer increases our capacity as an international partner in these areas, and it helps us to keep Canadians safe, and it helps to support our Canadian Armed Forces at the same time.
Sounds like great news. Okay, in the estimates, we also talk about a transfer from Natural Resources Canada to ECCC for the Federal Contaminated Sites Action Plan. I actually spent the early days of my career cleaning up spills from old buried oil tanks in Nova Scotia. So I'd like to talk a little bit about this. Can you give some context to the committee on what this action plan is and how it's going to help us to manage and remediate sites across the country?
Thank you. And this is something that comes up a lot is, how do we help to support the cleanup of these contaminated sites? You mentioned Nova Scotia. There have been many opportunities where the federal government has been able to actually help to support the cleanup. And so it's an example of partnership between Natural Resources Canada and Environment Canada about how we can actually help communities. So the transfer that you're referring to is actually the result of a memorandum of understanding between Natural Resources Canada and Environment Canada to conduct contaminated sites remediation activities at certain sites. This one, the one that we're referring to that was in this most recent SUP-C, is for the remediation at Eureka. And the fund supports the construction of a landform at the site for the treatment of petroleum hydrocarbon-impacted soils. So it's one example. That was really for a specific project, but it's part of a larger memorandum of understanding between Natural Resources Canada and Environment Canada to be able to treat these sites.
So in Dartmouth, in Nova Scotia, there's former military housing complex called Shannon Park. We've heard about it a lot. It's been chosen recently as one of the first sites for Build Canada homes, which is really exciting. 1,000 new affordable homes are going to be constructed. Can you talk about how remediation projects through this program will help land redevelopment for housing uses as we look to really ramp up our construction for housing supply?
Time is almost up.
Okay, sorry, thanks. It could be part of a longer conversation, but really what it does is by remediating sites, we actually do help in making sites safe again, and that's what we're working towards, is to remediate lands. So that's the most, but I'm happy to have a longer conversation specifically about that.
Thank you, Minister. Monsieur Bonnet, la parole est à vous pour 2.5 minutes.
Mr. Bonnet, you now have the floor, 2.5 minutes. Minister, your government in the undertaking to protect 35% of land and marine areas, and now you're up to 15%, I believe, on both, and that's by 2030. And there are groups, Birds Canada and other groups defending wildlife, who sent a letter recently, last week, asking that fund be brought back in to help protect this, and do you undertake to ensure that money remains available, and how much in the fund would you ensure remains available? I certainly understand that request, And I simply wish to say that I'm sorry, I was thinking in both languages. Give me a moment. For myself and for our government, it's of the highest importance to continue to protect wildlife, nature, and conservation efforts of all types. We know that we have that 31st of March end date. We're working on this. I don't have you a figure for you today, but I'm fully aware of the issue. Thank you. The prior Minister of the Environment had set up no permission to fund oil and gas exploration, for example. Could you tell us how much Canada is now funding the oil and gas business per year, the whole sector? I can tell you that we have $90 million going for new technologies and clean energies. Yes, but that's not my question. I do know the other figures. I'd like to know for fossil fuels, how many million? I think it is important to discuss the items on which we are spending right now. Yes, but I'm speaking about fossil fuels, how many millions a year? What I am showing you here is that when it comes to grants and contributions, and this is what you see in the budget, what you see before you, these are the groups that are receiving grants and contributions. And in the budget 2025, you can examine it, and what is in the budget provides you with that figure, those figures. Yes. So in the last budget, you are providing funds, grants and contributions to the fossil fuel sector. Could you give us the figure over the last year? What I am saying is that if you examine the budget, the grants that are there are $90 billion going to renewables. That's what's in there. Yes, but how many millions are you spending on fossil fuel? But what I'm telling you is the budget is very clear. The money is going to renewable energy and clean energy. And how much? 90 million. And you should be ashamed of this.
For 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome, Minister, for this wonderful little exchange. I'd have to rebut a couple of the other things that you've said in your opening remarks and other testimony. I don't think industry is asking for the industrial carbon tax writ large, but more it's like a case of the sword of Damocles hanging over their head as the least worst option. Related to cost-benefit analysis or the notion of that related to your spend, you just described increased spending in Environment Canada. Has your department contributed to any budget cost savings efforts similar to Agriculture Canada? You know, in this notion that we want to try to, the government wants to reduce spend by 15%?
So the parts about expenditure review are in the main estimates. I believe I'll be coming back to talk with you about that shortly, because this is a place that I come to frequently, so always happy to be back.
That's good, and I appreciate that, but it's the same
But
answer.
as you are aware, the expenditure reviews applied across all departments.
Have you contributed to anything meaningfully to that 15% at Environment Canada?
It's all actually, the main estimates have been released. You can see the numbers. So, I mean, you've used a subjective number. You want to say meaningful, like look at the main estimates, and we'll be back to talk about this.
What I'm getting at is that there seems to be a disconnect between different departments, right, and not an equal distribution of cost savings across the departments. Agriculture Canada has closed research centres that have made meaningful contributions to improve farming practices and environmental impact, like you say, and now these capacities might be lost to Canadian farmers. So I'm trying to understand the context of that, if there's balance and there's justification to closing these centres.
I can't comment on Agriculture Canada, but I'm sure you can speak to Mr. McDonald, Minister McDonald, about all of that.
Your department hasn't contributed to that effort?
I said that our department did contribute to the expenditure review, and all of the details are in the main estimates, which have been released, and
Thank
which
you.
I believe I'll be back to talk about.
You know, one other rebuttal, right? I think you made a statement that our potential customers look for reduced carbon load products, but I think today Europe really wouldn't care if their options are the Russia or nothing from the Straits of Hormuz. Canadian Natural Resources recently paused its $8.25 billion jackpine project quoting uncertainty around federal carbon pricing and methane rules. Do you acknowledge the regulatory uncertainty is directly delaying projects that would strengthen our economy? Or is the president of CNRL misinformed when he says government's carbon pricing policies have created an economic burden for long-term growth investments?
So the first thing I would say is that we've been very clear about the industrial carbon price and needing to enhance it. And I feel like if there's anybody adding uncertainty about it, would be the Conservatives who are fighting it every day.
I would beg to disagree, Minister. We're just
You're
merely
not
pointing
fighting
out
the industrial carbon price.
hypocrisy
Is
of it.
fascinating change for me. But I would also say that if we are going to talk about the industrial carbon price and about the work that we're doing to enhance it, in fact, CNRL actually came in and
Excuse me,
said
Minister.
that they,
I'm asking about projects uncertainty and projects going forward that are in the national interest and policies that are impeding those going forward.
But what I'm saying is that the head of CNRL came out and said that he was actually fairly quite hopeful about the MOU. And
I understand that, but that's notwithstanding federal policy, he's clearly stated that it is impeding this project. So no answer there. It goes beyond that, and CNRL
I could provide
also
more
a major.
information.
Excuse
Jeff
me,
Pine
it's my
actually does
time,
well under the
Minister.
industrial carbon price,
Across
actually.
the energy sector, the sentiment is not uncommon. It's quite common, and it even impacts the Pathways Plus project. It's also delayed because of uncertainty. What needs to change to regain confidence of investors?
So here's the thing. I would say that we're introducing certainty by being very clear about what we're doing with the industrial carbon price. I will say that we are working well with the Premier of Alberta in conversations and negotiations that we're having. We have just recently talked about the cooperation agreement that's out for consultation, which is actually an example of how
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's not really answering the question, so I'll move on.
It's actually directly answering the question of how we're working together, creating
But
certainty.
it's not working because the uncertainty still exists and projects are being canceled. So, Minister, exactly a month ago, I discussed with officials from your department exactly how many businesses in Alberta and Saskatchewan would fall under the newly proposed industrial carbon tax threshold of 10,000 tons, and we've had no data yet. Could you please provide that to this committee as soon as possible?
So right now, the federal system is in place. Alberta has a provincial agreement for their
Speaking to
form
the
of
reduction in the threshold
system.
from 100,000
No,
to
but
10,000?
I'm just saying, so there's a federal system. As it applies in the province of Alberta, it's the provincial system that applies. And so, you know, we work together. And what I would say is the industrial carbon price actually creates a threshold. Companies that are over the threshold will have to pay the industrial carbon price.
I understand
the
that.
ones under the threshold get credits. And by the way,
But the
Jack Pine was
threshold
one
is
of the
being
ones that
reduced
got
to
the
10,000,
credits.
which will capture more companies.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Fanjoy, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Mr. Fanjoy, you're on mute. Time's up.
Can you unmute him? Thanks. He has to accept the prompt, right? He has to accept the prompt. He does now.
Can you send them a text to accept?
Okay. I'm sorry about that. I thought I would be taken off mute automatically. My apologies. Minister, thank you for joining us again at ENVI committee. Canadians are concerned about affordability and climate action, and while Conservatives think that these two concepts are opposed to one another, I in fact believe that they are very much connected to each other. I'd like you to comment on how we can move towards a more affordable future by addressing climate change.
Thank you. Look, I would say two things in response to that. One is that we're making sure that we can create jobs for the economy of the future, good paying jobs, often union jobs, and that's what we need if we want to have a strong economy. That helps to make sure that Canadians earn the money that they want. Like, Canadians want those good paying jobs, and so making sure that we are manufacturing in a way that is for a low-carbon economy of the future, that we continue to diversify our trade to more countries and create more of those opportunities. That is what Canadians want to see. When we talk about building Canada, that is, a big piece of how we do that right. The second piece is about a protection piece. We know that if we do not fight climate change, there is a cost to that. I think that that's something that's lost in the conversation a lot of the times when I hear conservatives pushing back against every one of our policies. There is a cost to not fighting climate change. And in fact, they raised some of those examples when we're talking about concerns about wildfires and the like. So the other piece about it is, how do we make sure that we continue to fight climate change and take climate action so that that Canadians, we actually are protecting communities from these additional wildfires and the strength and intensity of these wildfires or these floods that we're seeing in our communities. So there are two parts to it. One part, how do we fight climate change because there is a cost? And you know what, I'm just talking about the economics. There's also a moral cost. Like, I want to make sure that I have a future that I'm giving to my children that's a bright future. I think that's what Canadians want: clean air, clean water, strong future. It's about how are we creating these jobs for the future in a low-carbon economy that's the global economy. That is where all the dollars are going globally. And it's about making sure that when we're building Canada strong, we're building it well.
We've recently seen a spike in energy costs, particularly related to oil and gas, and driven by the conflict in Iran and the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz. This is impacting Canadians, even though we're half a world away from this conflict. It's impacting Canadians in terms of their price at the pump. But what has not increased is the cost of renewable energy. And just last week, you were able to join me in Carleton, and we visited a very terrific project here in Carleton. It's a solar farm operated by EDF Power Solutions, and they have a unique partnership with a local lamb company, lamb farm called Shady Creek. And perhaps you could talk about how that partnership shows that there are opportunities to both combine clean energy and agriculture in rural Canada.
I thank you for taking me to your community and being able to see this. It was a great example of how things work so well together. We met, you introduced me to people who were sheep farmers who were saying that to be able to grow their herd, they needed more land, but they couldn't afford to buy all that extra land. And so then there was this opportunity that there was a solar farm nearby that needed to, maintain their lands. And so they were actually able to expand their herd by using these lands from this solar farm. It was actually a source of money for them to be able to do this. And it was a great win for the solar farm as well, because as I learned, sheep don't gnaw through any of the wiring or anything like that, and they get closer to the posts around it. I also got to learn about how this was creating good jobs in small rural communities. So people don't have to leave your community that you're in. They were actually there working on a solar farm and staying in this rural community so that they could be close to their home farming communities. It was a really nice example of how we could bring the two together, creating renewable energy, farming, and supporting and building the strengths of rural communities.
Thank you very much, Minister Debusson. So we have a couple of minutes left. So I've decided to give every party one question to ask. So we will start with the Conservative Party. Question answer, I guess. Who will it be from the Conservative side? Mr. Gill, go ahead.
Thank you, Minister, for being here. Regarding the proposed pollution prevention planning notice for primary food plastic packaging, an impact analysis conducted by Deloitte suggested that some food growers could relocate packaging operations to the United States if the requirements increase compliance costs. Has the department conducted its own analysis and whether the proposed P2 notice could affect investment decisions or led the packaging and processing operation moving outside of Canada?
Good question.
Again, what I will say just broadly in response to that is that when we're talking about food prices, industrial carbon pricing and the like do not increase the cost of food. Climate change does increase the cost of food, and that we are actually seeing that we need to take more action. We are actually building out greenhouse infrastructure, for example, so that we're more food secure right here in Canada.
Thank you very much, Minister. Monsieur Saint-Pierre, la parole est à vous pour moins d'une minute.
Thank you.
Mr. Saint-Pierre, you have little under a minute.
An excellent organization that I take some credit for creating a few years back. And there was an announcement on, I think, $100 million being mobilized for Advanced Carbon Removal Coalition. Can you quickly comment on how the work around carbon removal, and this is not CCUS, I know there's confusion there, how carbon removal benefits Canadians?
Yeah, thank you for that. Look, Canada has some really great opportunities. We have the geology for carbon removal. We have the know-how. We actually have some of the top clean tech companies in the area based here in Canada. It's an exportable kind of knowledge and that we can bring out to the world. And the announcement there was about the government being a first mover to help actually create more market certainty and to build out that industry. We need to move away from combustion as a country, but where that's not possible, then carbon removal actually helps us to make that last bit so that we can continue to reduce emissions.
Thank you very much, Minister. Monsieur Bonnet, la parole est à vous.
Mr. Bonnet, you have the floor. Madam Minister, you were sent information by a citizen regarding the weather news about there being a change on the 16th of March and that some people haven't access to coverage or not and wouldn't have access to information should there be an emergency situation. About 172,000 people who use this service, number of people then who wouldn't have information over the radio about extreme climate events. Are you aware of this? Thank you for the question. It allows me to provide you with a bit of information about all of this. So the weather radio system that we had and have is not really operational looking forward into the future. What we have now is other systems providing people with the same information. So when it comes to emergency situations,
Can force through. Alors on peut forcer sur la radio.
So we can really force through all radio stations as well as television stations the essential information so that people get that essential information during an actual catastrophe, not only on the internet and ongoing. So when it comes to people who are using the Coast Guard radio, there's that, and then there's satellite exchange of information. And I'll be very happy to provide everyone with information about this so that people will know how they can get all this information through so many channels. I just want to reassure you that during emergency situations, we are able to push through on an emergency basis on the radio, on television, through apps, etc., the information that's essential for the population to have. Thank you, Madam Minister. Thank you to everyone.
And I will briefly suspend the meeting while the Minister departs and we add some new witnesses to the panel. Le comité
The committee returns to its study of the supplementary estimate C 2025-2026.
the following government officials. Kurt Chinke, Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Financial Officer, welcome. Alison McDermott, Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy and International Affairs Branch, welcome. Megan Nichols, Assistant Deputy Minister, Environment Protection Branch, welcome. From Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, Terence Hubbard, President, welcome. Ian Ketchison, Vice President, Indigenous Relations and Corporate Services and Chief Financial Officer, welcome. And from Parks Canada, Andrew Campbell, Acting President and Chief Executive Officer and Senior Vice President of Transformation, welcome. And Andrew Francis, Vice President, Finance, welcome. On recommence l'interrogation des témoins avec le Parti conservateur.
So we will start the question and answer period with the Conservative Party, 6 minutes, please. And to all witnesses, when you see this card up, it means that you have 1 minute left for your question and answer. I'm sorry, let me start that again. When you see this card, you will have 1 minute left for the question being put, and then if you are answering that question, this tells you that your time is up and you must finish your sentence in the answer.
For 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, witnesses. Appreciate your time today and look forward to what you have to say. For Parks Canada, you had some discussion earlier in the first hour about fire and fire mitigation. Could you tell me what specific changes have been introduced to the fire mitigation or fire management plans in parks like Banff, Jasper, Waterton?
Yeah, thank you very much. And an excellent question, and happy to respond, Mr. Chair. Since just in the past year alone, Parks Canada has taken on 44 across the country, 44 vegetation management initiatives, which are.
Our time is very limited right now. Very specifically, what changes have been introduced to Banff, Jasper, and Waterton?
Oh, just on those three parks.
Yeah, just very specifically, what did you learn from the failures at Jasper?
So I would not talk about Jasper as failures. So I
don't care how you want to characterize that, sir. I'm sorry,
Mr. Chair, if I can respond to the question. So within both Waterton Lakes and Banff and Jasper, we have increased, in fact, the buffer zones around each of the critical pieces of infrastructure. So in Jasper, we have done mitigation efforts, and there's now approximately 2.5 kilometers of buffer zone around the town of Jasper. Across the country, as I had said, we had done 44 initiatives. There are 140 hectares in Banff. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much. Any specific changes or implementations in Banff? Because Banff hasn't burned yet. Jasper's already burned. So
in Banff, in the past year, we've done 140 hectares of wildfire risk reduction. There's also been the completion of a 74 hectare fire guard around the community of Lake Louise. There has been increased forest thinning around all of the pieces of critical infrastructure that move through, whether it's the Trans-Canada Highway, whether it's the Alta, or whether it's the KCCP. All of that work has been done in the past year. So hundreds and hundreds of hectares have been further fire guarded within Banff National Park.
Is there more work yet to be done in Banff?
There is always fire and forest mitigation. As forests continue to grow and as risks continue to grow, there is always redoing of some of the fire guarding work.
I appreciate that, but
and so that work will continue forever.
More specifically, urgent work that directly leads to the upcoming fire seasons and the safety of Banff and Lake Louise itself.
Yep, we continue to have prescribed burns and within Banff in this year, and we will also have some mechanical removal, particularly on the bench. If you're familiar with Banff, there will be further fire reduction on the bench.
Thank you very much. What percentage of Jasper has been rebuilt so far?
So approximately 50% of Jasper's housing is currently with either starting in, have approved plans for rebuilding.
About 50%?
About 50%.
Okay, thank you. Reporting in 2025 stated that residents rebuilding are facing delays due to strict soil contamination testing and permitting. I mean, I get the soil testing requirements, but permitting, what accelerated permitting processes by Parks Canada are being done to allow rebuilding to happen quickly?
So, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to tell the member that there are 0 outstanding permits currently.
Thank you for that.
Currently existing. All of the soil, 100% of the soil has been remediated. We are very pleased to say, and we actually have been working with the Red Cross in putting in types of social supports for individuals.
That goes off topic from what I'm interested in.
Sorry, in order to help the people whose homes have yet to be rebuilt, those social supports.
I understand that, but so 50% of the homes haven't been rebuilt yet. What specific policy changes have been introduced to improve permitting?
So, excellent question again, Mr. Chair. So there have been increased, so in fact, the Builders Association of Alberta said that that the rebuilding and the permitting and the streamlining of permitting that is being done in Jasper should be a model for the rest of the country.
I don't need the commentary or the hearsay. I would
No
like
hearsay,
specific,
that's specifically the quote from the
I want
individual.
specific changes to policy. What changes have Parks Canada introduced to their permitting practices
So we
to
have
accelerate permitting?
Sure. So we have increased the number of staff that are doing permits. Again, there are 0 permits outstanding. At this point, we have also looked at being able to take an accelerated permitting process for house building. I don't know whether you've been involved in the house building, Mr. Chair or other members, but there are about 5,000 decisions that everybody has to make. So we have taken and streamlined that process so that there is an accelerated process. I would say the envy of the rest of the country, if anybody has ever been involved in home building, as I have as a home builder before I started with the government.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have one final question.
It's
and this
20
is very
days.
brief. This is my time, and I take some exception to this.
Point of order, if we could just kindly ask the witness to finish his sentence, that just maybe question of tone, please.
If I can comment. Okay, we're wasting time. One final question.
So you can respond, and that's it.
Have you received specific media training by the Government of Canada to avoid answering questions?
No, I have not received any type of media training to avoid answering questions.
Thank you very much.
All of my media training was actually done
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell.
in
Pleasure.
2010.
Monsieur Saint-Pierre, la parole est à vous pour 6 minutes.
Yeah, I would just like
Mr. St. Pierre, you have 6 minutes.
parliamentarians is to have a certain demeanor and maybe watch our tone when we're invited to speak with witnesses. And I very much appreciate that there's, I think, 8 witnesses here today, so thank you for taking your time. I'm going to have a less aggressive tone, and if you will allow, I'll ask some questions in French, because I'm a member of Parliament from Quebec. Je fais beaucoup de mon travail en français, donc...
And I carry out much of my work in French, so I'll be putting a couple of questions, perhaps with a slightly more diplomatic tone here. And I will put the questions, and you can share the questions, of course, in your answering. Mr. Campbell, my first question, however, is directed to you, Mr. Campbell. The question is for Parks Canada in a public review in 2025. 90% of Canadians feel that nature is essential to Canada's identity, and a strong Canada, of course, also involves availability, people being able to get to nature, and you're aware that that sort of planning is underway. Do you have a communications plan to promote this new programming for Parks Canada? Yes, indeed, and thank you for your question. I will like to respond by saying that many of us, of course, watched the Olympics and saw that we had a lot of advertising for Parks Canada and for Canada Strong run during the Olympics. And we have plans underway for more advertising as well. We work, as usual, with Destination Canada Agency to create this sort of advertising for Canadians and for tourists as well. Thank you very much. And perhaps a follow-up question to you again, Mr. Campbell, or to your colleagues. Last week, the Secretary of State for Nature, my colleague Nathalie Provost, announced about 30 new projects. I think this was in Hochelaga, and basically critical habitat for species at risk. Could you give us quickly an overview of the advantages of this type of project and how these sorts of projects will help Quebec and Canada? Yes, for myself and for Ms. Shannon, I, of course, speaking for Parks Canada, there are advantages of having greater protection available for threatened species in a number of the parks throughout the country, of course, but that programming of Ms. Shannon's will be better spoken to by Ms. Shannon herself.
Last week's announcements was, I believe, 31 projects to protect species at risk across the country. It's a long-standing program that we've had in place. Small initiatives, but community and place-based. We see that through these initiatives, there are really good targeted outcomes for species at risk.
Merci. Peut-être une question pour...
Thank you. And now a question perhaps for Ms. McDermott or Ms. Allison.
Je pense en janvier.
In January, in Newfoundland, there was another announcement of several projects, I think 80, for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities.
More on those projects, ou peut-être parler un petit peu pour l'impact positif pour la...
Could you tell us a bit more about the positive effects of these projects on that province and on Canada?
Investments that are being made under the National Adaptation Strategy and as a means of supporting community resilience to climate change in partnership with the FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, under the Green Municipal Fund, which is investing over $530 million in adaptation projects through the Local Leadership for Climate Adaptation Initiative. So that's the broader that is the broader kind of program, and the specific projects in question, I actually don't have a whole lot of details in front of me, but that's something we could certainly share, that there was obviously a recent announcement in relation to some of these bringing benefits, supporting activities on the kind of risk identification, assessment, and mitigation for municipalities, really. In a lot of regions of Canada. So happy to follow up on Newfoundland if that's
that'd be great if you can provide any examples from Newfoundland or from Alberta, so my colleagues can see the great work that's being supported across Canada. And don't have much more time. The chair is showing me my last minute. Maybe Mr. Campbell, I know the previous questions you had a harder time to respond, so maybe I can give you a quick 30 seconds if you wanted to fully elaborate on some of the responses you wanted to enunciate earlier while my colleagues were attempting to ask you questions, and you seem to have a bit of struggle for some reason.
So, maybe just on those that have not yet rebuilt in Jasper, maybe I'll make just comment on that, is we have been working with the Red Cross, as I had said, for social supports, and the other thing that they've done is gone out with us to ask individuals why, in fact, they have not rebuilt. About 40% of them have had trouble obtaining quotes from builders to meet the conditions of their insurance. Another 25% of them have had troubles with their insurers to date. So the majority of issues that still exist within Jasper are between private individuals and their insurers. So we are working and seeing what we can do to assist in those, but certainly from a permitting perspective, that no longer seems to be the issue.
La parole est à vous, Monsieur Bonnet, pour 6 minutes. Merci.
Mr. Bonnet, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you. I would like to discuss the reduction of the 2025-26 budget, the budget expenditures. There being a lower amount. I understand there are about $700 million less in grants and contributions compared to the prior budget. And is this really about $286 million less for the Canada's Nature Fund? Yes, this is a question for Environment Canada. Thank you for the question.
In our GNC funding, grant and contribution funding from 25-26 to 26-27. This is for two main reasons. One, for the sunsetting of several temporary initiatives. Some examples of
Right. So is the decrease really for the Canada Nature Fund, 286 million, I think?
Nature Fund, the Enhanced Nature Legacy Fund is $381.8 million.
300, pardon?
381.8 million dollars.
OK. Donc, il n'y a plus cet argent-là disponible.
Okay, so that amount is no longer available. They had funding before, and this year they don't have any. It's not replaced by anything?
The minister alluded to this as well when she was here speaking. This is a sunsetter, one of our sunsetting initiatives. It's normal for any fiscal year for a number of initiatives to sunset. There's a regular process to seek renewal through the Minister of the Department of Finance, and we have a number of decisions pending.
OK. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres argent pour...
Is there other funding? I mean, reaching the 30% protection target by 2030, is there in the budget? I mean, there was this, 300 and something million, and that is replaced by something else?
The funding is not being replaced at this time. Like it is sunsetting, but we do have other funds within the nature program to support nature initiatives.
OK. Et au total, comparativement aux 3...
Okay, in total, compared to the 300 and some million that were there before, these other sources of funding allow for less funding, or how many million?
In front of me for those particular items, we'd have to get back to you.
Mais c'est moins que 300 millions.
But it's less than 300 million.
Je n'ai pas les détails. Fournir ça?
Yes.
OK, super.
You could provide that to us? Yes, thank you. So that I see a 60% less in the some 147 million for the contribution to from savings or the fund for low carbon for 2026-2027.
Yes, there is a reduction in our low carbon economy fund. This is a fund that is being phased out as its funding cycle concludes. As the government is shifting focus to other areas such as investment tax credits for clean energy. This actually represents one of the department's comprehensive expenditure review reductions.
Quand est-ce que vous...
When do you think you'll be rendering public the ministerial departmental plan, which will give us more details about the appropriations expenditures 2025-2026?
Expected to be tabled quite soon. They're tabled by the president of the Treasury Board on behalf of all departments.
Okay, quite soon, c'est...
I don't have those details.
OK. Vous allez pouvoir nous revenir par la suite?
Okay, so you could get back to us with that?
C'est genre dans 15 minutes ou dans 15 jours?
That's like in 15 minutes or 15 days? Well, we foresee it's being tabled today, actually. All right. Thank you. So perhaps within a few minutes. All right. In the last departmental report, 2025-2026, we see that there are initiatives that would be sunset between 2026-2028, Canadian Heritage, the international participation in climate change initiatives. So which have come to an end, and what are the dates, what are the deadlines for some of the others?
So there would be a list of a number of initiatives. It would be easier if we provided a list in writing to you.
Mais que ça va cesser la participation du Canada au financement international.
All right, so Canada will stop funding international efforts to fight climate change?
As Kurt noted, many of our government funds are sunsetting. That's something that happens to funds, every year. And typically, at this point in the cycle, those reinvestments or extensions have not always been confirmed, announced, and certainly not supplied. So it is, while there are some reductions that are occurring as a result of deliberate decisions not to renew, In other cases, there are renewal decisions that are still in the process of being made. So it would probably be better to wait a little bit into the next year before, summarizing all of the.
That's correct. And, any decisions that would be taken on those sunset or renewals would appear in future estimates processes.
Cool. Mrs. Anstey, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to the witnesses for coming. I think you probably know the direction that I'm going to go with the parks officials, so thank you for appearing. I'm pretty passionate about Newfoundland and Labrador, where I come from, Grossmore National Park. So I just wanted to dig into this a little bit more because I get an overwhelming amount of inquiries about this. So the $5,000 that you're allocating to wildfire management in the national park, do you think it's sufficient? There's 1,805 square kilometers of park there and several communities. So is that sufficient, do you believe?
Yeah, so so the 5,000 was around a very specific question. So if I can, there is a group that works within Grossmore National Park in our resource conservation side, and the resource conservation staff actually do work in that area, and it would be in their regular budget, so in the regular budget process. So above and beyond that, in the last year, we did another study just to look at, which was the 5,000, which was to look at the impact of the spruce budworm and what had happened with the deadfall in the forest.
So that was sort of leading into my next question. So I'm glad that you brought that up because, it looks like a tinderbox, right? So are you aware of how many acres are covered in deadwood within the park?
Off the top of my head here today, no, but
could you get that for us?
We could for sure.
Okay, so that's the concern, right? People are, and it's everywhere, and I don't know if you've been to the beautiful park, but it totally looks like a tinderbox. So also, there was an internal audit or evaluation of wildfire preparedness, but there hasn't been one conducted in Grossmore since 2022, according to your response. And of course, as you are aware now, the spruce budworm and the deadwood is immense within the area. So why haven't you done a formal review since then, obviously knowing this is an issue?
Yep. So we do the reviews and the periodic updates to all of the plans based on what the wildfire risk situation is at the time. And so although the deadfall trees appeared, they actually are carrying still a lot of moisture, is what was found through the analysis that was done in the last year. So again, there are areas of the country where we have a set limited amount of resources, and there are areas of the country where we're needing to do more of those. As you all know, Terra Nova National Park, for instance, was under higher threat and risk in the past years. So we've that would be a higher area of priority.
So we're just got to hope nothing happens.
Sorry, we're also working with the province. As I said, we have a provincial memorandum of agreement with the province in order to be able to look at the province as a whole from a risk mitigation perspective. Their study said, in fact, that we still are not, and their work has said that it isn't as high a risk as other areas that we need to put our resources towards.
Okay. I'm just going to shift gears a little bit because there's, I get a lot of parks inquiries. So there is an area within the park, it's between and I don't know how familiar you are, but south boundary of Glen Burnie to Mackenzie's Brook Road, okay? So residents have also consistently reached out to our office about ATV use on this 1.3 kilometer section of road. Now, there is an agreement that was signed back in 1973, but ATV use, as you know, back then wasn't as predominant. Now, a lot of people in Newfoundland and Labrador use their ATVs to access their cabin areas, go berry picking, and Parks Canada is not allowing them to use their ATVs on this section of road. Now, RCMP, local RCMP know the importance. They don't issue funds, but the Parks Canada people do. And so a lot of people reach out wondering if there can be some sort of an adjustment made given the realities of what rural people in this area and what they use their ATVs for now. It's very important to them.
And certainly we're always open to have that discussion. I mean, there is as you know, within the agreement, there is certain prescriptions of not permitting certain types of things, but we're always open to discussion. And, we meet with the Snowmobile Association.
I know.
We meet with, yes.
Yeah, and I know you've made allowances there. So do I have a commitment that we can further
Certainly
this
with
conversation?
Certainly with the superintendent, we are happy to have that conversation. Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Miedema, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks so much to all the witnesses. I know that none of us would be here if it weren't for all of the hard work of our bureaucracy. As a former local government bureaucrat, I very much appreciate everything that you do. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes Park, which is just adjacent to my riding of Halifax. I'm a very strong supporter of parks. I also have an environment and climate background, and I'm really excited about it. This would be Canada's newest national urban park, similar to Rouge Park in Toronto, and it could be as large as 255 hectares and would provide essential conservation land as well as recreational opportunities for the residents of Halifax and its visitors. It was initially conceived with support of the province of Nova Scotia and the Halifax Regional Municipality. Is this shared responsibility and joint funding still intact today? And how are ECCC and Parks Canada working with the province and the municipality on next steps for the project?
So thank you very much and for the question and Mr. Chair, again, happy to be able to respond to this in that we continue to work with both the municipality, the province, of course, a great partner on this, the Mi'kmaq Nations. And so as we are moving forward, there are also lots of civil society organizations that, of course, we're working with. And we are in, I would say, daily conversations with all of them on still looking at how we continue to move this initiative of a national urban park in Halifax forward. Of course, there are lots of considerations that every layer of government is looking at. There's transportation networks. There's the existing pieces of legislation that protect some of this land that we are needing to look at how all of that will work together. And but things continue to move forward for the establishment of that project.
So would you have any idea on timeline and who is driving the moving forward of the project? Is it the federal government? Like which level is really driving the project to success?
So Parks Canada has the project leader on that. So I will say we are all driving it forward because lots of people want to see this happen. Unlike those that are asking questions, Mr. Chair, I don't get elected, so I don't get to make announcements on dates and timing. So perhaps that would be something better to ask your colleague, the minister.
Okay, excellent. I'm also really excited about the prospect of Wind West. I think it's going to be game-changing for Nova Scotia and for Atlantic Canada and really contribute to Canada's clean energy future. And I know it's still early days and we're in regulatory planning stages, et cetera. The call for bids is currently open. And so I just have a few questions about how it's moving along. Can you provide details on what type of coordination is taking place between the Impact Assessment Agency and the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Energy Regulator for the environmental assessments of the project?
Thank you for the question. As you noted, it is still early days for the project, but we have been working in close cooperation with the province of Nova Scotia and the Offshore Energy Board for some time. A lot of the work started with a regional assessment on offshore wind that we carried out in collaboration with both of those partners. Was completed about a year ago now. And it informed the province's decisions and the board's decisions on prospective wind energy areas that will be kind of moving forward through their land tenure process. We've also been working very closely with the province of Nova Scotia in terms of a cooperation agreement in terms of environmental assessments moving forward, and have long-standing cooperation through the joint management approach with the offshore board. And so we will be working in tandem, leveraging the wealth of information, evidence, and data through the regional assessment to streamline the individual project assessments as they move forward and continue to look for opportunities to support that sector.
Can I just ask, was that cooperation agreement signed, or is it still to be signed with Nova Scotia?
Nova Scotia is still to be signed, so the public comment period closed, I think, last Friday.
Moving along. Yeah, excellent. So the Wind West major project involves actually, oh, am I out of time?
Thank you very much. Monsieur Bonnet, la parole est à vous.
Mr. Bonnet, you have the floor. Microphone, please. Microphone, please. So, Marinvest, a light natural gas project, a journalist has mentioned a 20-page document that has been provided. Could you provide the document to the committee with, of course, any precautions to be taken when it comes to industrial secrets and so on and so forth, but so that we could examine the document ourselves here in the committee? I'm aware of the document. We would need to review any limits on sharing it, given that it's not a document of ours. Very well. I'd like to go back to there being any money in the budget for, there's this international plastics treaty currently being negotiated. Is there any money for managing plastic waste in general relating to that treaty signature?
Peut-être que vous allez pouvoir nous revenir.
And perhaps you could get back to us with that information. Otherwise, my 2 minutes will not be used efficiently. I don't have exact details here in front of me, but I can say that there is funding related to plastics policies through 2027. So could you provide us with that? And to finish, I have a list of small requests that you could also follow up on. I know there will be documents made available today, but there won't be many details in them. Could we get in greater detail a list of grants and contributions programs that are being sunset this year, coming to an end this year? Also a list, once again, of grants and contributions that are lesser than they were in the past. As well, we can't seem to get hold of the amount in grants and contributions provided to the fossil fuel sector by the federal government. There may be some that you consider to be inefficient or whatever, but could we get a list? Because you have a policy of reducing, at least there seemed to be an intention of reducing such grants and contributions, but perhaps we could also get hold of the data about the reductions in the budget linked to abolishing the carbon tax. Thank you, Mr. Bonnet. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Leslie, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to return back to the proposed Steel River Watershed National Park in northern Manitoba. My question is, given the minister was unclear, who will decide which activities will be permitted and who will have access if the park is created?
Yeah. Again, happy to respond to that question. As the minister had stated, we are still in the consultation phase. So part of that consultation phase, at the end of it, will be the creation of an establishment agreement. And normally, in that establishment agreement between First Nations rights holders, between the province and ourselves, there will be some of that gets established. On that as well, obviously, we meet with anybody that has a current land tenure, either within the area or not. So, you had asked earlier about lodge and lodge owners. They will be part of that process as well, and part of that establishment agreement process. So,
What does that timeline look like?
Again, that would be a question sort of better asked to the minister, just as
you don't get answers that way.
Just wait. But I will give the answer that I can give on the timing. Certainly, it is our intention to continue to move forward quickly on Seal River with the province. The province, they have their own consultation process or soon out, which also will impact the timing on that. So.
That space, Mr. Campbell. Now, federal disclosures show that your department has provided more than $7.7 million to advocacy groups promoting this proposal, including the Seal River Watershed Alliance and the Audubon Society. Now, at the same time, we've heard from local tourism operators, hunters and anglers, saying that they have not been consulted yet thus far. So why this double standard, and is that funding that's currently allocated, that 7.7, is that going to be continuing into next year, or is that also ending with this supplement?
So there will continue to be some of that funding because there are multi-year contribution agreements with some of that funding. So the Seal River watershed, we have more than one that are closely words that are close, but on the Seal River watershed, that group is primarily the First Nations in the area, and part of our agreement with them is, in fact, and they were the ones that have brought the project forward, and part of our establishment with them is to provide some capacity funding in that way. But yes, from a formal consultation perspective, certainly the Manitoba Federation of Hunters and Anglers and the wildlife will get an opportunity, certainly, as everybody else.
I certainly hope that comes to fruition. Now, nearby, there was Wapusk National Park established a number of years ago, and licensed hunters were excluded from that area despite earlier assurances from Parks Canada at the time of implementation. Is there a risk that that's going to happen in this new park if it moves ahead too?
So Wapusk National Park was done under a different sort of regime of consultative processes of earlier national parks. So again, it will be part of the negotiation of the establishment agreement, and we will be listening to all concerned groups as they move forward, including, I will add again, the lodge owners that are in and around the park area.
Okay, thank you. I'll move south. Clear Lake. Will boaters be allowed back this summer?
So we are still in the final stages of discussions with both the Clear Lake Association, with the 7 First Nations, with the Métis, and we are hoping in the very short order to have a response out.
And I certainly hope it is a positive one, because people would like to regain access to that. With that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to pass my remaining time to Ms. Anstey.
That was almost a question or not?
Chair?
Sorry, Chair.
You can submit to the committee, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chair, pursuant to the notice of motion that I tabled on February 25th with pertaining to the net zero advisory body, at this time, I would like to move it. Would you like me to read it into the?
Please.
Sure. That pursuant to Standing Order 108, Section 2, the committee invite former members of the Net Zero Advisory Body, Simon Donner and Catherine Abreu, to appear for 1 hour. That the committee requests the production of all briefing materials, memoranda, analysis, and formal advice provided by the Net Zero Advisory board to the minister related to emissions reductions targets, sectoral pathways, and interim milestones, and that such documents be provided to the committee within 30 days of the adoption of this motion, that the committee request documentation of all expenditures incurred in relation to the Net Zero Advisory Body since its creation in 2021, including but not limited to travel, hospitality, venue, catering, and administrative expenses, and that such documentation be provided within 30 days of the adoption of this motion. This came up even several times today, speaking with the Environment Minister, very relevant to the work of our committee, and I think it's an important meeting to have. So thank you, Chair.
So notice period has been respected. It was the clerk tells me that it was distributed February 25th. So, Mr. Eric Saint-Pierre.
Yeah, can I maybe ask two things, that we could release the witnesses and suspend momentarily while we recuperate this motion? There's been a lot of motions distributed recently, so I just want to find 2-3 minutes to find this.
Is that the will of the party to suspend the witnesses? Witnesses, you're free to go. Thank you very much for your time. And we suspend. Committee resume. Mrs. Midima, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the time to review the motion in detail. I know that for staff, the idea of 30 days to be able to produce that volume of materials is causing concern. So I'm wondering if we could think about, I think the preference would be to eliminate the timeline, or to say in a timely fashion, or at least have it be the same standards as an ATIP request or something like that, because I think 30 days might be problematic. So I'm wondering if we could consider that for both the second and the third paragraph, saying that everything had to be done within 30 days of the adoption of the motion. Thank you.
Mr. Leslie.
Mr. Chair, I'm sure on our side we would accept a friendly amendment to 45 days to be in line with an OPQ response.
Sorry, I have Mr. Bruce. Mr. Bruce?
Yes.
To go.
Can you hear me? Thank you. We seem to be on another fishing expedition. Mr. Leslie, you'll be pleased about that. I'm wondering what is gained by producing all of the expenses in great detail of the Net Zero Advisory Board. I mean, this is these are subject to usual checks and balances and auditing. It seems like an unnecessary waste of time for this committee. If there's a desire to have the witnesses attend and speak to their experience, that's one thing. But I think that we're the focus should be there and not on all this extraneous data, which is readily available anyway. No one here is asking for the Conservative Party to provide detailed expenses on travel and hospitality for their recent leadership review in Calgary. It does cost money for people to do work. We understand that, but let's keep the focus on what can be productive and what is simply a fishing expedition.
Thank you, Mr. Fanjoy. Mr. Leslie.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Despite all of that, I think it's entirely reasonable. We did hear from the minister today saying that she expects, I believe it was next week, to be meeting what sounded like maybe the first time with the significantly reduced in size board. And I think it's entirely reasonable for a board that is apparently alleged by the co-chairs that had to resign because their opinions were being ignored and not listened to by this government as they continuously rolled back their own environmental policies aimed at achieving their own environmental targets, that we ask a reasonable set of information. I appreciate the friendly idea from our colleagues across the way to expand that to 45 days to allow it to be in line with an order paper question, to provide the details, but most importantly to appear for 1 hour. The two people that were in the media discussing their departure from this advisory board, I think is a great opportunity to come and understand why that happened, and for the government to be able to better understand how the body can be a functioning body to provide reasonable advice to the minister. And as environmentalists on this committee, I would have to assume that you couldn't find a reason to not agree with having a net zero advisory body be functioning. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Monsieur Saint-Pierre.
Well, it brings me a lot of joy to hear my colleague from Manitoba say that he's an environmentalist on this committee. So thank you for admitting your passion for the environment and passion for this committee. Maybe going back to fishing and looking at my colleague from Newfoundland, who I hope one day will invite us to her beautiful province to actually go fishing, other than fishing expeditions in this committee. But maybe I digress. But I might have a question more around the intention if I'm going to the third paragraph. And I think that's what my colleague from Carleton was alluding to earlier with the use of the word fishing. And no offense to Alberta, there's fewer lakes, and I'm on an island, so I can literally go fishing in Rivière des Prairies. But I digress again. That's another question. You might not want to eat it, but my question is probably around what is the intent of getting the documentation around expenditures for travel, for hospitality, for venue, for catering, administrative expenses. It's more of a question of what are you trying to get with that? And secondly, isn't that information, maybe it's a dumb question, but isn't that information already public, or shouldn't it be public? So I just, maybe a response is what are you trying to get from that third paragraph, if you may?
Monsieur Bonnet.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, I agree with the proposal to link the number of days, the new number, 45, with what's usually expected for access to information requests. No problem with that. I have no issue with transparency. We are here to ensure that we can access documents. Some people call it a fishing expedition. I call it transparency, accountability, our ability to do our work correctly. But I do suggest this amendment that at the first paragraph to appear for 1 hour. I'm sorry. I have no objection to your presenting your amendment. However, we already have an amendment on the floor. So, I'm sorry. Didn't realize it had actually been put forward.
So we can bring forward another amendment to the 45 days. So that's what was suggested as an amendment. So I don't have any conclusion to that. Pardon.
I'm sorry. There is an amendment about the 45 days, and we haven't finalized that. So before you can present your amendment, all right, then let's vote on the 45-day amendment. Ms. Milima.
If it's a friendly amendment, we still go through the process of voting on it? Okay. All right. Well, then I propose the amendment of changing in both paragraph 2 and paragraph 3 the number of days from 30 to 45.
We have on the floor now an official amendment. Any further debate to that amendment? All those in favor? All those against? Amendment to 45 days is carried. Là, on passe à vous, Monsieur Bonnet.
And now we can hear from you, Mr. Bonnet. I propose the following amendment at the first paragraph. So this person to appear for 1 hour on the 26th of March. So I would add the date, March 26th.
Donc, Monsieur Bonnet, le greffier
Mr. Bonnet, the clerk informs me that the House is not sitting on the 27th of March. So, yes, is not sitting on Friday the 27th of March. Yes, but I'm suggesting the 26th. And if we're sure that the committee shall sit on the 26th of March, we can proceed, because we have heard that it is possible that the 26th of March might be treated like a Friday. That's the point. I'm not sure of that yet. Mr. St-Pierre, on this issue, on this proposed amendment, just a comment, my opinion on my colleague's amendment, given that there have been other motions heard before. I think a Bloch's motion regarding extra carbon tarification, and I think the 26th of March, this is our last day this week we come back, and then we've got 2 days, then we're off into mid-April. I know there was some urgency on the industrial carbon tax to move on that. So perhaps given the urgency of that testimony, would it be realistic, or is it realistic, to speak of the 26th of March for what you're saying? Perhaps you could tell us why it's so important that we hear this person on the 26th of March in the context of all the other projects that we are going to be dealing with here, all our other plans for our work. Mr. Bonin, go ahead. So the new calendar sent to us would have on the 24th of March witnesses for the industrial carbon tax, and then we will be discussing potential improvements to the greenhouse gas reduction plan, referring back to that net zero advisory board. And I think the 26th of March would be a good time to hear them, and they could provide us with further information, better understanding their role and how they contribute to reducing emissions. So I have no problem with the date.
So we have a backlog of work in this committee, and we saw how slow things went on Tuesday this week, and we have a lot of priority work already planned and scheduled. And I think we need to triage what is critically important here. The minister herself said that that she's meeting Friday with the Net Zero Advisory Board, and I just need to clarify that it's not a diminished size of a board. There are just vacancies, so it's not, Mr. Leslie, a shrunken board. And I just really don't understand why we would want to keep throwing things into our very full calendar. Like, we're not going to get these reports out and these studies done that were the work proposed by the other parties. So I like to throw it in ahead of completing the work we're doing now and starting the industrial carbon study makes absolutely no sense to me. And I reject the notion of scheduling it for the 26th of March.
Mr. Fanjoy, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree. We have these motions that are keep being dropped. It seems that their intent is ultimately to prevent us from getting to work that we've already committed to working on. As has been noted before, we have a limited number of committee days in which to address the work that we've committed to. We have an ERP study that we have to continue to work through and finalize, and I think that we're creating distractions that are preventing this committee from doing the work that we've already committed to. So I'm not in principle against having any witnesses attend at some point in the future, but for things to be dropped in at the last minute that suddenly become our top priority, it just does not strike me as good practice.
Thank you, Mr. Fanjoy. Mr. St-Pierre.
Yeah, I might want to add to that because, that we had there was a motion for the water study, which is a comprehensive, I think 400 pages or something, and we have the ERP study, which we're making some progress, but a lot more work is required. So I just wonder, does this push us back, and are we going to be here over the summer? So I'm still trying to understand the urgency of March 26th, which is literally the next meeting. And from a policy perspective, I think the industrial carbon price, as the Canadian Climate Institute has said, is one of the most effective climate policies for this country. Whether we agree on it or not is another issue, but I think it's a really important a piece of policy. I think it's a piece of policy that our government is taking very seriously, and I think would actually be very informative and would provide really important analysis and recommendations. So I'm just wondering, are we delaying, work on the industrial carbon price for something that we can study at a later point, but is it urgent, right? So it's it's a question of priorities, right? So it's more of a comment, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Mr. Leslie and then Mr. Bonnet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate the clerk highlighting the challenges with if we sit as a Friday we can't sit during question period, I don't believe. So our typical slot, we'd have to move it. It's perhaps more complicated. So I would be willing to, I like the idea of having a date, and I appreciate my colleague proposing it. I'm not sure if that's necessary. I'll leave that to him if he has any comments. But what I find interesting is the chord that seems to have been struck here. The apparent efforts to filibuster the Environment Committee over the invitation to the one co-chair and the other member that have resigned from the Net Zero Advisory Body. The minister was clearly frustrated earlier by being asked questions about this topic. So I'm just curious if we can expect the committee to stop filibustering this, get to a vote, and let the members of this committee decide whether or not they want to invite these witnesses and ask for these documents in an effort of full transparency like taxpayers fully deserve.
Bonnet.
Écoutez, Monsieur le Président, je
Mr. Chair, I share my colleague's opinion. I think it's quite obvious that our colleagues on the other side don't want to have these witnesses come before us, yet they are witnesses who have decided to leave a committee that was set up that seems very important to the government. The co-chair and someone else decided to leave, resigned, and I don't think that it is in line with your will to fight climate change, not to hear them. So I think we should go to a vote, and thank you for your information about the 26th of March, Mr. Clerk. If that is a problem, if the Thursday that would become a Friday on the 26th would not work, we could just change the date, and I would withdraw my amendment regarding the date, because there's a bit of ambiguity about whether that date would work. So let's just get to the motion itself and deal with the crux of the matter. I know that our Liberal colleagues would prefer that we didn't, but we're now wasting our time discussing a very reasonable suggestion to hear credible witnesses.
Nous orienter sur la question du 26.
All right, so I will just look for more information about the 26th of March. It's still ambiguous, its status, so I will ask the clerk to speak to this, the date itself.
I don't have the text of the motion adopted by the House in front of me, but the wording is essentially that when the House adjourns on Thursday, March 26, it shall stand adjourned until Monday, April 13. So the motion itself does not prescribe, and I'm going to double check this, but the motion does not prescribe that the program for Thursday, March 26 be a Friday program. And as a result, QP would not interfere with the committee's usual meeting time of 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Thank you.
So back to the drawing board. Meeting up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have deep respect for the Net Zero Advisory Board, and I happen to know Ms. Abreu very well. I think, just similar to my comments earlier this week, if we were going to invite two former members of the board, why would we not also invite some current members of the board to get a more fulsome picture? But I think I'm going to just talk a little bit now about not just being an MP, but being a representative of a coastal community that's already living the reality of a changing climate, because this is the Environment and Climate Change Committee. And when you
has been raised, Mrs. Mediema.
I'm just wondering if during the commentary, could you define filibuster for us? Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Mediema, the floor is yours.
invent filibustering, Mr. Leslie? I don't know. Anyway, when you represent a coastal riding, you're, as many of my colleagues know, even across the table, you're not able to treat climate change as a theoretical debate or a distant future problem. The environment drives our economy, it shapes our culture, and increasingly threatens rural and urban and coastal and central communities alike through extreme weather events. In Nova Scotia, we're not waiting for climate change to arrive because it is already here. We saw in 2022 when Hurricane Fiona tore through the Atlantic provinces. It destroyed homes, it devastated our coastlines, and it left communities in the dark, literally. I saw it firsthand in my riding of Halifax in 2023 when the Upper Tantallon wildfires forced residents to abandon their homes and filled our skies with smoke. We see it in the historic flash flooding that washed away roads and infrastructure, and in the rising sea levels that threaten the very foundation of the Halifax Peninsula. Let me be super clear. The science is settled. The debate over whether climate change is real or whether human activity is the primary driver has been over for decades. And the work of this committee is to advance action on climate and environment. The global scientific community is unequivocal. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is unequivocal. Our own Canadian scientists are unequivocal. In Nova Scotia, our provincial climate risk assessments paint a very stark picture. By 2050, we're looking at significant temperature increases and a severe rise in extreme weather events. We're expecting an increase in relative sea level of up to a meter by the year 2100. That's going to devastate our coastal communities, which should concern many members of this committee. Our oceans are warming, becoming more acidic, and losing oxygen, a direct threat to our vital fisheries and marine ecosystems. We're even facing new and emerging threats to our freshwater quality because of heavier rainfall and warming lakes, which is a problem for many members of this committee also. In fact, all of them. We all depend on our freshwater resources for our very survival. To stand in this committee or anywhere in this country and attempt to cast doubt on any of these facts is irresponsible. It's failing to fulfill our collective duty to the Canadians that we were elected to protect. And to try and interfere with the good progress that this committee is trying to make across its approved studies and witnesses that have been invited is also irresponsible. So the science is settled, and it's past time that our political discourse reflect that reality. Which brings me to the core of why I'm speaking on this now. If the science is settled and the impacts are devastatingly clear, why haven't we taken all the necessary steps to address the climate crisis? And sadly, the answer lies with our political institutions. Too often, the fight for our planet is derailed by cheap political plays and hyperpartisanship. Climate change is the greatest existential threat of our time, yet it's routinely reduced to a wedge issue, or we just play little games that waste time in committees that are intended to be very serious. It's seen as a tool to score cheap points in the polls rather than a crisis demanding a unified national response. I am red because I am worked up, dear colleague. I am worked up at these. We have like 1,000 motions that are interfering with the due process of this committee, and I'm very unhappy about it, as I have indicated for many days in these past months. We see progress stalled by manufactured outrage, by short-term thinking that prioritizes the next election cycle over the next generation, and by the deliberate spreading of misinformation. The atmosphere does not care about our political stripes. Wildfires don't check the polls to see if a riding leans blue or leans red. The storm surge that floods our coastal communities don't ask about party affiliation. Unfortunately, we've seen this dynamic play out even on this very committee. At a time when Canadians are facing record insured losses from extreme weather, when communities are rebuilding after fires, floods, and storms, Conservative members choose to cast aside many witnesses that their party here invited themselves to waste valuable committee time with these motions. Witnesses are invited, taxpayer dollars are spent, staff time is used, they've invested their time in preparing and coming, and we need to stop derailing our planned calendar. What makes this especially concerning is that committee time is one of the Parliament's most limited and valuable resources. Witnesses clear their schedules, experts prepare evidence, and communities across Canada look to this table expecting serious study and constructive recommendations so that we can actually move forward in a good way together. When that time is redirected towards motions that don't advance our current study, it undermines the very purpose of committee work. Canadians dealing with rising insurance costs and repeated climate disasters deserve better than procedural distraction. At a time when insurers are withdrawing coverage from high-risk areas, when municipalities are struggling to finance adaptation infrastructure, and when families are questioning whether their homes will remain insurable in the years ahead, our responsibility is clear. This is why we are trying to move forward with the work of this committee and get everything done that we need to do. We should be hearing from emergency managers, from climate scientists, from housing experts, and financial institutions about solutions, not revisiting debates designed to stall progress. Healthy disagreement strengthens democracy, but obstruction disguised as study weakens public trust. Canadians can tell the difference between good faith scrutiny and tactics intended to run out the clock. If this committee, and I know you can laugh, but this is important, like we can't keep doing this, and so this is my way of telling you that we cannot keep doing this. If this committee is to meet the seriousness of the moment, we have to remain focused on evidence-based work that helps communities adapt, that reduces risk, that protects Canadians from the economic consequences of climate change. The opposition has wasted valuable committee time by proposing even like other meaningless studies, like on single-use plastics. Like this is an issue that has already been extensively studied by Parliament. The single-use plastics ban is a landmark achievement of this government, and it presents a significant step in stopping pollution and building a cleaner economy. Canadians expect this committee to focus on climate resilience, disaster preparedness, industrial carbon pricing, etc., protecting homes and livelihoods, and not to divert attention.
Sorry, Mrs. Miedema, I'll give you a second to breathe.
Désolé, point d'ordre, Monsieur le
Bonnet has a
Président.
point of order. Monsieur Bonnet.
On a tous
Mr. Bonnet, we have all understood that our colleagues on the other side of the table are filibustering, but until what time do we have resources, House resources, translation, for example, because it certainly seems that they will use up all our time so that we won't have time to debate the motion. I was waiting for someone to ask, and we can certainly ask our clerk. I have already done so. We have resources until 1:30. Thank you. And perhaps our colleague could stop this and we could get down to real business.
Getting settled ground is an hour not spent helping communities prepare for the next wildfire, the next flood, or the next storm. When politicians use climate policy as a political football, it's Canadians who pay the price. It's farmers who lose their crops. It's families who are losing their homes to wildfires. It's small business owners who can't afford the rising insurance premiums. If we don't act now, it's the next generation who will inherit a world that is less stable, less safe, and less prosperous. We also need to recognize that moving past this gridlock is not just an environmental imperative, it's an economic one. The global economy is transitioning, the race to a net zero future is on, and countries that lead the transition will secure the jobs, the investments, and the prosperity of the 21st century. If we allow partisan bickering to slow us down, Canada will be left behind.
Second. Yes.
If we could see clarification on how long we have resources for, and if this planned filibuster will take us into the backroom deal, organized majority liberal government to hide transparency from Canadians?
So I will ask the clerk to share with us how the time is calculated, being that it's a bit confusing with what you see on the net and the hour that is attributed to services. So he will clarify the time slots and when they begin and when they end. À vous la parole, Monsieur le greffier. Si vous serez confortable de le dire en français, comme ça, Monsieur Bonnet.
You have the floor, Mr. Clerk, to ensure that Mr. Bonnet and the rest of the members are able to understand the situation fully. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that our interpretation services can offer their assistance for 2 hours and 15 minutes of a meeting without counting suspensions, and the meeting began at 11:03 a.m. and has taken about 13 minutes of suspended time. So if my calculation is accurate, we have interpretation services until 13:30 or 1:30 in the afternoon. That's the information that I have just received. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very well.
It's 1:30.
It's 1:30. Since we no longer have any services of interpretation, we can go on.
Is the meeting suspended or adjourned? Like, I'm just curious if this filibuster to avoid transparency is continuing tomorrow?
The meeting is adjourned. Or
I'm just curious what the procedural.
Strictly speaking, the meeting adjourns at the will of the committee. From time to time, and usually, if ever we see the chair adjourn the meeting directly at the usual time of adjournment, it's because the chair observes that there's implied consent among the members. I hope that answers your question, sir.
there's no interpretation as of right now, so I can't go forward. We need to have interpretation.
I understand that. So when there's not consent in that scenario, what happens?
A consent to continue?
Adjournment.
For adjournment?
We're not at the normal time, but we're running out of resources.
In my role, I advise the chair and all members on matters of procedure and administration, and I capture the decisions of the committee.
Okay, perhaps if I could offer a friendly idea in which the government members might come to their senses over the break week, and I would move to adjourn this debate.
I'm sorry. Suspend? There's no further discussion, so the meeting will be adjourned.
There's no consent, though. I still don't.
Well, you can't move a motion because we do not have any resources. We do not have any interpretation. So. So, the meeting is adjourned.
So is the translation happening right now?
No, translation has ended at 1:30. 3 minutes ago.